everybody. Mike Griffith here. Welcome to today's DawgNation special presentation. I'm very pleased to be joined by former Georgia coach, former Miami coach, former Miami quarterback, Mark Richt. Certainly no stranger to the Georgia fan base. Very popular coach, a guy that I believe represented Georgia with as much class as any coach that I've been around during my career. Coach, let's catch up a little bit. I saw you put a tweet out. You're sitting in a U-Haul, and I'm thinking, I got to get the story behind this one. How's it been? What have you been up to?
Well, the last 2 days I've been driving a 26-foot U-Haul around the Southeast. Went from Destin, Florida, picked up a bunch of furniture for one of the kids, and then went to Tallahassee, got some more furniture, went to Nashville, dumped some off, then went to Athens and dumped the rest of the truck and got rid of that thing yesterday. Thank the Lord. It's nerve-wracking riding that big truck with all these 18-wheelers going down the road. But I'm doing a lot of dad duty, grandpa duty, husband duty. My wife's keeping me pretty busy.
That's pretty awesome. Well, I'm sure the very first thing people are going to notice, you got that golden bear on your shirt. Now you got to give us a story. There's got to be a story.
Right.
We see Mark wearing a Cal shirt. You got to be a story behind this one too.
Well, this is in honor of my good friend Mark Fox, who's coaching at Cal now, and he sent me a couple T-shirts, and I'm always good for some free stuff. I got free gear my whole life, so and when I woke up this morning, it just looked good, so I snagged it.
It does. Blue looks good on you. Hadn't seen that in a while. You're an ACC Network guy now, though, so kind of want to wade into those waters. How do you go from football coach to TV guy? What was that transition like for you as far as the ease, the comfort, and what's the most challenging aspect of that for you?
Well, I liked it a lot. You know, you're still on a team. It takes a lot of teamwork to put a production on like that. And it was fun to be on the team and not have to be in charge of the team. And I'm working with young people, you know, E.J. Manuel and Eric McLean, those guys that are on the show with me on the huddle. They're both around 29, 30, you know, young guys. And matter of fact, I mean, I'm the oldest person on the set, period. All the producers are young and everybody's, you're just working with young people, having fun. It hasn't been a huge challenge, actually. You do got to do your homework and you got to know your stuff. But when you do a studio show and you're covering the same teams over and over time, you get familiar with them. And the thing about the prep work is on Friday night when you do your previews. But then, you know, game day Saturday, you're really reporting what you see. And so it's been fun. And I've been able to kind of cut it loose a little bit too, have a good time with everybody.
Is there been an ACC Network 10-meter high dive splash? I mean, I keep waiting to see you go backflipping and challenge these other ACC younger guys to do the same thing.
You know what? I'm kind of glad. Part of me retiring had to do it, not want to do any more backflips. I think I've retired from that too. I've always landed on my feet, so that was important.
I was talking with Claude Felton, who, as you know, is the greatest sports information guy in the country. I was fortunate to introduce Claude into the College Football Hall of Fame. And he was telling me when you were a quarterback at Miami, you came off the bench to lead a victory over Florida. And I know the old Georgia beat writers, and I'm sure some of the audience has probably heard the story, but I haven't. I want to be selfish. I want to know about this memory. I want to know about Mark Richt beating Florida in college football as a quarterback. What happened there?
Well, here's the deal. It was a rarity for me to get on the field because I backed up Jim Kelly my whole career. And of course, Vinny Testaverde and Bernie Kosar were freshmen when Jim and I were seniors. So it was loaded full of superstars, and I got to be there along for the ride. But we're playing Florida one game, and Jim got hurt, and it was second half anyway. I don't know what quarter it was. Maybe it could have been fourth quarter. Might have been. I don't even remember when it happened to be in the game, to be honest with you. But he got knocked out of the game, and we were down 10 or something like that, down maybe 9. But long story short, I completed a touchdown pass to Rocky Belt for 55 yards on a little square end. And then on a 3rd and 10 or a 3rd and long, I hit a tight end on a drag route, got enough yards to set up a 54 or 55-yard field goal that Danny Miller kicked, hit the crossbar, and went through to beat a Mickey Andrews coach defense at Florida. So we won the game. But the thing I shouldn't mention, but I will, but I was those 2 completions I mentioned, I was 2 for 13 that day. But the only 2 that counted, it made it work.
You got it done. A little known fact that I found in doing my research for this, and again, got to ask you this. You were with the Denver Broncos behind John Elway,
Right.
of all people. And of course, John's now general manager of the Broncos, but just so happened to be my favorite quarterback growing. What was that? I mean, it's like, can you go anywhere where there's not like some future Hall of Famer on the same roster? What was that year, and what was your NFL experience like with Denver and Elway?
Well, here's the deal. Speaking of being behind all-time greats, after college, I got a shot with the Miami Dolphins, and Dan Marino was there. So you can imagine how that went. But my first year out, I was with the Broncos. We spent the summer working out together, but when camp started, I was there 7 days, and I was out of there. So it didn't last very long. But I got to see Dan Marino. I got to see John Elway up close. Got to see Jim Kelly, Vinny Testaverde, Bernie Kosar. I think God knew I was going to coach quarterbacks, and couldn't look in the mirror to see what a good one looked like. So I got to see those greats.
No doubt. And you got to see a lot more greats. You were a part of Bobby Bowden's staff. And of course, Bobby Bowden, one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. And when we talk about quality and when we talk about fantastic ambassador, we remember Coach Bowden and how well he represented Florida State all those years. I think, you were there, a big part of that staff. What did you take away from Bobby Bowden in those years that you spent in Tallahassee?
Well, number one, my second year as a coach, I was a young graduate assistant coach. One of our players was shot and killed. And the very next day, Coach Bowden had a team meeting and basically just said he didn't know where Pablo was going to spend eternity, and kind of laid out the gospel right there for the guys and said, you guys are 18 to 22 years old. You think you're going to live forever, just like Pablo thought he was going to live forever. And he's gone now. He goes, if that was you last night, do you know where you'd spend eternity? And of course, I'm in the back of the room. He's talking to the players, and I'm hearing what he's saying. And I knew where I was going. It was not going to be a good place. So I actually went to his office the next morning and prayed to receive Christ as my Lord and Savior, and really changed everything in my life. It simplified my life to where my goal was to live a life pleasing to the Lord, and didn't make it easy necessarily, but it made it simple. And that's kind of how I've been rolling ever since.
No doubt. A fantastic story. Great anecdote, Coach. And I got to believe that while Florida State was having all this success, there had to be programs coming to you with coaching opportunities. And I don't know what you've shared and what you haven't, or if you're willing to tell us, but were there some job offers, and were there some that you almost took before Georgia came along? Right.
Well, when I was the quarterbacks coach, I did get offered quite a few coordinator jobs over the years. But, I always would measure, am I happy? Is my wife happy? Are my children happy? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? And of course, working with Coach Bowden was such a huge blessing for me and anybody in the profession. So, every time I asked those questions, I was like, I love it here, and there's no reason to go. As a matter of fact, I got offered the offensive coordinator job at Mississippi State one time, and the AD there, I can't remember who it was at the time, but I said, I got this young quarterback I really like, and I think I'm just going to stick around at Florida State. And he's like, if you're going to like follow a kid like that, he goes, there's always going to be a good player, always going to be a guy you love. Well, that guy happened to be Charlie Ward, and he did pretty good. So I think I was wise to stick around. But after I became the coordinator, there were some head job opportunities. The University of Pittsburgh, 5 years prior to taking the Georgia job, came open. And my wife and I visited, and we were all she was ready to take it, which was shocking to me. But long story short, I said I wasn't ready. I told my wife I wasn't ready, Catherine. And I said, do you want to live in Pittsburgh the rest of your life? She said, no. I said, then we're not taking the job, because I don't want to take a job knowing I'm looking for another job. So I said, if we ever get a head job, I want it to be a job that I'd want to stay for good. And she goes, well, what would be a place like that? Well, it just so happened that year was the year Donnan came in at Georgia, was hired there. I said, well, Georgia's one. And I said, Clemson is another one. something like that. And so 5 years later, the Georgia job popped open. And I don't want to bore everybody with this one, but I'm talking to Coach Dooley and President Adams at the time. And you have the interview with these guys in a hotel somewhere. I forgot where. And Coach said he'd get back at the end of the week and let me know. Well, like a day later, he calls me. He's like, it wasn't the end of the week. It was like the next day he offers me the job. And I'm like, I don't know if I want the job. He goes, well, I'll give you another $50,000 a year. I said, Coach, I'm not looking for money. I'm just not sure I'm ready or that I want it, And he said, well, he goes, here's the deal. He goes, you call me first thing in the morning and let me know, because if you don't want it, I got to move on. And anyway, after talking to my wife and having some prayer, my brother calling me and saying I was nuts and all that kind of stuff, I knew I wanted the job. It was about 2 a.m. So I called Coach Dooley at 2 a.m. He's like, hello, who is this? I said, it's Coach Richt. He goes, I said, I want the job. He goes, well, that's great. He goes, what time is it? I said, it's 2 a.m. He goes, why'd you call me in the middle of the night? I said, I was afraid you were going to sleep on it and change your mind. So I want to catch you before you woke up. And so that's how I accepted that job.
Man, that's fantastic, Coach. What was it about Georgia? You said there were 2 places that you were interested in that you could stay for a lifetime. And if anybody looks at your resume, the thing that stands out to me when I compare it to somebody like Nick Saban or even Kirby, not many stops. I mean, you had a cup of tea there in East Carolina, but for the most part, when you went somewhere, you stayed there. What was it about Georgia that appealed to you, that you saw, that made you believe that this could be a career move?
Well, one thing, just from a family standpoint, my wife and I thought Athens would be a great place to raise our kids. We believed it was a great town, a great community, and we thought we could plug in and make a difference in the community there. Obviously, Georgia had the tradition of winning. I know that if you can win somewhere in the past, you can win in the future. History does repeat itself, and there's a reason why, Georgia was able to win a national championship and some SEC championships. So I knew it could happen. And then, you're looking at the talent base between the state of Georgia and the state of Florida. You probably don't have to go any further. You can go further if you want, or there's special players that you got to go get. But for the most part, you get the core of your team within about a 100-mile radius of Athens. So those are some of the things that went into play.
So the final numbers are 145 and 51, 2 SEC titles, 5 East crowns. I mean, that is a Hall of Fame resume if ever there was one. And you moved on from that. You were National Coach of the Year at Miami. It wasn't like you moved on and that was it. You were the Walter Camp National Coach of the Year. Are there, for coaches, and I guess there's so many players and staff members that you run across, and you mentioned some of the gentlemen that hired you. I mean, as far as games go, I mean, I guess in fandom, you think about certain games that you hold on to, remember.
Right.
Were there takeaways, like even right now, if I say, man, what were the greatest – coaches have a tendency to remember the losses.
Right.
That's just the way they are. But what were the happy memories that you take away?
Well, at Georgia, the first season when we beat Tennessee at Tennessee, the Veron H touchdown, the hobnail boot, Tennessee was a great football team. And that was our first road game in the Southeastern Conference. And we were still trying to establish that we knew what we were doing with the players and the fans and even ourselves as a staff. And, when we came back the way we did and fought them tooth and nail and stuck it in the end zone at the end when it counted, they had just scored on a long screen pass with about a couple minutes to go. And that place
Travis
went nuts.
Stevens. Yep.
Yeah, and it looked like it was over.
Sure
and but our guys, Randy McMichael made a couple great catches over the middle. Damian Gary started the drive with a little option route. And then we got into that area, that red zone, had one timeout left. We got David Green on the sideline, said, look, we're going P44 Haynes. And if it's a split safety look, it's going to be there. Just don't miss it. Don't overthrow it. And I said, if it's a one high safety, then just throw it in the stands and we'll have one more play, because we had about 8 seconds to go. And so there was a split safety. When I say split safety, 2 deep type look, Veron goes down the middle, makes the linebacker think he's going to block him on the isolation play, and linebacker bit the cheese, and tried to take him on, and Veron slipped him and was wide open in the end zone, and David gave it to him, and that was it. But I don't know if anybody remembers, but on the extra point, we're up by 2, 26-24, I think it was. We're up by 2, and I'm telling everybody for the extra point to take a knee. And they're like, what? They take a knee on the extra point. I'm like, I didn't want that thing to get blocked and scoop and score, and they get a 2-point conversion to tie the game. So we took a knee and then ran out they ran out the clock just a couple seconds. But, that was a great memory. And then, of course, the Auburn game in 2002, when we had the great comeback and the launching of the ball to Michael Johnson from David Green, and got us in the championship for the first time ever. And then winning that game was big. But there's a lot of other ones. I remember that the LSU game at home when Mettenberger and Murray were battling away, the blackout at home, the first blackout against Auburn. I obviously beating Florida's butt when we rushed the field. That was a lot of fun too. And then in Miami, real quick, when we played Notre Dame at home and just rolled them and ended up being, I think we were number 2 in the country after that game. It kind of put us in that spotlight nationally.
Yeah, I think didn't Lawrence Cager have a night? Because I know he had another big game against Notre Dame this last season. But Cager was a guy, didn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
Cager, he might have made a play or two. Who was the guy? Darrell. Yeah, Darrell Langham was the kid that caught the big touchdown. Kind of built like Cager, big kid. Made the play against Florida State. I'm sorry. Notre Dame game. My bad. I was thinking of the Florida State game. We beat Florida State. The Notre Dame game, Cager did have a huge catch on a 4th down that kept a drive going that made a huge difference in that game.
Yeah, that was the first time in more than 10 years that Miami had won 10 games. So obviously that was a huge season for the Hurricanes and led to that National Coach of the Year honor, which was, nobody saw that one coming. Let's be honest. Where Miami was and you leaving Georgia, I mean, that was an incredible coaching job. So I want to backtrack a little bit to your Georgia career, though, because one thing that kind of I find it curious. Now I cover Kirby. Back then I was covering Tennessee, by the way. They're just now getting over the hump. I was there. Casey Clausen came in, beats Florida twice at the Swamp, celebration, but no, there's Georgia standing right in the path. You weren't supposed to be there, by the way. That was Philip Fulmer. He was supposed to take over the East, and you and Georgia stopped that. That was the storyline I wrote for about 5 or 6 years, just so you know. So thanks a lot. But it worked out for Georgia. It worked out for you, and Tennessee seems happy. Philip's back in charge now. I think everybody's happy. But Kirby Smart is such a defensive mind, and I cover the guy week to week. He's so into, and he's like on Mark Richt's staff as a running backs coach. So what's the story of Kirby Smart being a staff member coaching RBs under you at Georgia?
Right. Well, that deal was going to be, I just wanted him on my staff. I knew he's a great recruiter. I knew he's a Georgia man. I knew that he was going to be a guy. I just knew he's a great coach. And the plan was over time and maybe a short amount of time to integrate him back on the defensive side of the ball, either as a linebackers coach or DB's coach. But at the time, it wasn't working out. The timing wasn't right on defense, but I had a space on offense and just wanted him to be a part of us. And then I think when Nick Saban went to the Dolphins, Kirby ended up going with Nick at that point. But the plan was to eventually and sooner than later get him on defense.
You say you knew he was a great coach. What did you identify back then? I mean, he's 44 now, so I'm doing the math in my head. What was he, 29 years old? What did you see in him back that far?
Well, if you look at Muschamp and Bobo and Smart, those 3 guys are kind of kindred spirits. They're old school ball coaches, got a tough mentality, guys that kind of grew up around it. And I know Coach Bobo's dad coached high school ball his whole life. And I can't remember if Kirby's dad was a coach or not. I think he might have been. But those guys, you just knew the 3 Musketeers or whatever you want to call them. You knew those guys were hard-nosed, tough ball coaches that could recruit and understood the SEC and that it was a rough place to coach and a rough place to recruit. And I knew they could do it. And Kirby obviously has proved that.
So now Georgia's got a couple of ACC transfers, some guys that you're familiar with and had a chance to visit with you in New Orleans. And you shared some initial impressions on Jamie Newman and Trey McKitty. Just your general thoughts on those guys and
Right.
what changes with the transfer now that there's no spring drills for these guys, Coach? How much is this
Right.
going to hurt Jamie Newman and the new coordinator?
Right. Well, I'll go to Trey McKitty first. At Miami, we had a kid named Brevin Jordan. He's one of the best tight ends in the country now. McKitty, I felt, was very similar to him in his skill set. And we were trying to get the kid. We thought we might have a good shot at him. He ended up going to Florida State. But I think he's a really good ball player. But Jamie Newman, I think, is an elite player. I think he's a top 10 pick kind of guy. He's big. He's 6'3", 6'4", 230-ish. Very physical runner, but a great long ball accuracy guy. A guy that was hitting close to 80% of his passes. And it wasn't just dinking and dunking. He was launching it down the field. One of the better down the field passers in the country. So the fact that he couldn't go through a full spring and the whole summer and all that, it's going to be tough. But he's been a leader. He's been a guy who's, you don't have to worry about his physical or mental toughness or his ability to process information. I'm sure with a good solid camp, he'll be ready to go.
What are your general thoughts? And this is a topic, and I'll throw the date out there. It's May 14th, just so everybody knows that watches. This is such a fluid deal with COVID-19, this pandemic, and how things change, projections, ideas. Everybody's throwing everything against the wall right now, it seems like, Coach. This is an unfair question. But at this stage on May 14th, what are your general thoughts about getting the guys back together? I talked to Gene Stallings a few weeks ago, and he said, I'd rather have my guys on campus where I could take care of them rather than out in their communities. Just your general thought about where this whole deal is at.
Well, the one thing about football is team, and it's a big team, and there's a lot of guys. There's 125 guys on most college rosters in the SEC, somewhere in that number. So, and then you got COVID-19 that wants you to social distance. It doesn't want anybody close to each other. And, it's hard to train with football and not be close to each other. You know what I mean? So you got to be testing these guys like mad. But I believe this. I think if university presidents and board of regents and governors say no campus, no students on campus in the fall, I don't think there's any way there's going to be football in the fall. If the students come on campus, then I think there'll be football. Okay, now, if for some reason there's not football in the fall, I think it'll happen in the spring. And now, can you go a spring and then let them rest in the summer and go the next fall and try to get back on track? That'll be a big question. And if you do that, you probably got to shorten each season maybe a little bit to make it work. But it's not gonna be normal by any stretch, because even if they do play, the stands aren't going to be full. I can't imagine all of a sudden packing 80, 70, 80, 90, 100,000 people into the stands. I don't think that's going to happen. Even if fans were allowed to, I don't think they would do that at this point. And so it's crazy, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a football season happen in the spring, because the bottom line is the first season that's going to get played once school's in is going to be football, because the revenue just has to carry all the other sports. It has to carry football. It has to carry even the smaller colleges that need those big paydays. It makes everything work in college athletics. Now, obviously, basketball does too, but football is a big driver of revenue.
Oh, yeah, the numbers are remarkable when you look at the Georgia athletic budget, which just continues to grow and grow. Last couple questions, Coach, winding down here. Kirby has built an annual championship contender. You left him Roquan Smith. They played for a title a couple years later. A lot of your kids you recruited were a part of that. Now we're seeing his defensive identity emerge. Offensively, though, it looks like they're trying to go from pro style to a little more RPO. Just how much of a challenge is that? You watch enough college football to know.
Right.
What do you think about where Kirby has the program right now, the direction, and their championship hopes this year?
Right. Well, you mentioned it. They are contenders. They're obviously contenders for the East, probably the favorite for the East. You win that, and obviously you're in that championship game. If you win that, you're in the playoff for sure. So the chances of getting there, they got a good road to get there. I think with Newman Jamie Newman, if he plays like I think he could play, to complement what's happening on defense and to really help make things go, I think it won't be that hard to do the RPO stuff. The RPOs are pretty simple, to be honest with you. For years, pro football would trickle to college and college would trickle to high school, but it's been the other way around. The high schools were the ones doing the spread. The high schools are the ones running RPOs, and then everybody starts looking at their high school tape and says, maybe we'll try that. And all of a sudden having great success. And, if you want RPOs to go away, you got to change the rule and not let those linemen be that 3 yards down the field blocking. I mean, they're 3 yards down the field blocking. And if you're a linebacker, they're not even pretending like they're blocking the run. They are blocking the run. So that linebacker's got to respect the run. And when he does, he's in a great conflict to try to play those little passes right behind him. It's not fair really, but as an offensive coach, it doesn't bother me too bad.
Well, there's something you and Nick Saban agree on right there. Saban was pulling his hair out, and he said, "Oh, if you can't beat him, join him." Do you have any background with Todd Monken? Have you run across him or worked with him?
I never have, but I know he's by reputation outstanding.
Yeah, my last question has to do with kind of recruiting and kind of tradition here. One thing I've seen is this clock that coaches are on, this 24/7 cycle. It's not just for media. You guys recruit year-round now. It seems unbelievable. And with the game in Jacksonville, Georgia and Florida have played there for years and years and years. And I've talked to Pat Dye about it, and it's a topic that's kind of come up again with the contract being extended to 2023 right now. Just your thoughts on that. There's a tradition to it, but Kirby's pointed out the value of that home recruiting weekend, especially now there's an early signing day in December. And then I just look around at Athens proper and say, man, that's a lot of money going to Jacksonville. Where do you stand? Because you've seen this from every dimension, right. I've got to believe.
Well, my problem is it's not truly neutral. If you're going to play in what's been called the Gator Bowl for years, and if you're going to play in the state of Florida every year, it's not neutral. I said, if you want to have a neutral site, let's have one in Jacksonville and one in Atlanta. Let's rotate the neutral sites with each state. Let each state benefit from those paydays, and from all the fans and everything that it attracts. If not, just go back to home and home. But I mean, I was okay going neutral site, but let's make the neutral site in Georgia every other year and make it fair.
Well, you're not on a neutral site now. You're back in Georgia, like it or not. These people are going to claim you. I know you went to Miami. I know you coached the Hurricanes, but Coach, you're certainly celebrated here in Georgia. I think you had an incredible career with the Bulldogs. And, I guess the thing I would say that I hope people understand, and you heard me drop earlier that I covered Tennessee and I covered Georgia and I covered Alabama. And the constant with Georgia is the first class operation. And it went right from Claude Felton to you. And actually, in 2007, I was the football writers president. I got one congratulatory letter, and it was signed by Mark Richt. Now, I don't know if Claude forged your signature or put it on your desk, but let me tell you, I never forgot it. And when I ended up with this Georgia job, and you talk about faith and religion and knowing where you're supposed to be, I said, I'm supposed to be here. And you were supposed to be here as well. And I really appreciate you sharing those stories today.
I'll say this. My family loved our time at Georgia. 15 years is quite a long run anywhere, especially in the SEC. And we knew it was a blessing. My children really consider Athens home for them. They all grew up, went to school here, and it was a great time for us.
We appreciate it, Coach. And thanks so much for joining us. Let's do this again closer to the season when we have a better idea what the heck we're talking about as far as this coming season and how they're going to do it.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good day, Mike.
All right. Good luck with your move, Coach. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There he was, Georgia coach Mark Richt, former Georgia coach Mark Richt, former Miami coach Coach Mark Richt. Really enjoyed having him on here. I want to take a look at some of the comments. Appreciate you joining us here on this DawgNation special. Decided to do something a little different today, and Coach Richt has been moving his family, as he told you, across the country. Still a very busy guy and staying very active. And, the fact that he's driving a U-Haul and helping people move, I know some people said, how's Coach Richt's health? I think we can assume he's doing okay if he's driving a U-Haul across the country and helping his kids move. We had a chance to visit with him a little bit earlier this morning. Obviously, you can tell he's in good spirits. You know, the respect and the love that he has for Georgia, very clear, as he's right here in Northeast Georgia right now. And just a lot of fun, you know, first class. And, you know, Eric says, show him the letter. Michael Carvel actually has that letter. Michael, I don't know if you can show folks that letter. I sent a picture of it to Michael before the show. The congratulatory letter. Michael said it was up a little bit earlier in the show, but, you know, that meant a lot to me. And freelancing that Georgia-Hawaii Sugar Bowl, I mean, just being around the Georgia program, I just thought to myself, you know, this is a really first-class place. And, you know, just eyes and ears at all the media days and national championship games, and Georgia would come up. And it was always in a positive tone. And I think that starts with Coach Dooley and you know, through Coach Donnan and Coach Richt and certainly Kirby now. I think Georgia has a national respect that a lot of other heavyweight programs, it's somewhere or another maybe lost. But I just get the feeling that there's a lot of love for Georgia. You know, maybe the Florida fans and the Tennessee fans and South Carolina fans, Georgia, okay, there's 4 or 5 schools that got a real problem with Georgia. But the rest of the country, I mean, this is a first-class institution, and you meet the people that are there, and you meet the people that built the program and the years that Coach Dooley was there. 15 years Coach Richt was there. You know, the 2 SEC titles, the 5 SEC East, 1 out of every 3 years he's winning the East. And that's with Tennessee on top of their game. And that's with the Florida Gators on top of their game. And that's with Steve Spurrier at South Carolina. You know, Spurrier didn't just go away. He was a thorn in the side. I ran his records the other day. I put him up on Twitter. There were some Florida fans that were upset with me because I poked fun at Danny Cannell saying that Florida was the team to beat in the East. I really thought that was kind of an overboard statement. And, you know, I guess not because I covered Georgia, but because of how good Georgia's done, I kind of thought it was disrespectful and just like, you just think Georgia's going to go away. And nobody wants to talk about Georgia's championship caliber defense. I mean, they have the best defense in the nation returning, and it just seems to whistle through one ear and out the other of some of these national analysts. Like, are you paying attention? Did you not watch what are you missing here? But they're missing it. Now, I guarantee you that one person that's not upset about this is Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's loving it. He's loving it that they put out a list of the top 10 cornerbacks and Eric Stokes and DJ Daniel and Tyson Campbell aren't on there. His players, Malik Herring retweeted. Georgia feeds off of this stuff. Monty Rice loved it when he heard that a former coach said that he couldn't carry Roquan Smith's job. These guys live, and anybody that watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, that gives you a mind, that tells you a little bit about the football mindset. Part of what made Jordan so great is he had the mindset that a lot of these football guys have when they go between the lines. Like, you know, we meet Solomon Kinley off the field, and we've had him here on DawgNation, and he's jovial, and he's telling stories about being a lifeguard and doing backflips at 330 pounds and popping an inner tube at Kirby Smart's off Kirby Smart's boat on the lake and eating Jake Fromm's grandma cookies. But you put Solomon Kinley between the lines, and we're talking stone cold killer and equipment, and that's the mentality. So when Georgia gets this disrespect, when they're looking for reasons to get up and push, it's right there. It's Danny Cannell saying that the East runs through Florida. It's the commentators saying the top 10 cornerbacks, nobody from Georgia. It's everybody looking. It's making Alabama the odds-on favorite, even though Alabama's defense was absolutely atrocious last year. Why do we just assume their defense is? So it's kind of interesting to me that Georgia, even though they're the 3-time SEC East defending champs, which is something that, you know, I guess you got to go back to Spurrier, they're not getting their due. So that I find that pretty fascinating and interesting. But I think that Georgia is a popular pick. I think they're very well liked in the fan base. And again, I go back to not just Coach Dooley's time, but I go back to Coach Richt. And you saw and heard how he represents himself, his faith, his family, his programs, whether he was talking about Miami, whether he was talking about his time with Denver in the NFL, and particularly his time as Georgia. Listen, if people get that vibe. I got that vibe as being the other beat guy. I remember covering a Tennessee-Georgia game, and I did the opposing locker room, and Coach Richt is in there talking about the loss. And, usually as a beat guy, you're just there to get the quotes, write the story. But this guy was genuinely hurt and feeling bad for his players. I'm going, gosh, I'm starting to feel a little bad for Mark Richt here. This is a really good guy, and I'm this grizzled sports writer, and Coach Richt is like looking into the eyes of the audience, and you're going, this guy loves his program, he loves his team. Oh, this was tough, but that's just kind of how Mark Richt rolled. First class act. I know Kirby Smart was the first one when Mark retired to put a tweet out about how proud he was to work on Coach Richt's staff. Of course, Kirby also spent some time under Coach Bowden. He's well known for his 11 years under Saban, but you got to think that Kirby took something away from that year under Coach Richt and that year under Coach Bowden as well. And you think about that Florida State dynasty and Mark Richt being there all those years. I just think he was a fascinating subject, and I'm really glad I've had a chance to spend time with him. When I was in New Orleans to cover the national title game, I did a couple of interviews with Coach Richt. I just walk up with a camera and say, hey, can you talk about Jamie Newman in Georgia? And boom, he does it. So I know we asked early in that interview about his transition to television, but the cool thing about Mark Richt is, he's completely relaxed. He's very comfortable in his own skin, and, he shoots you straight and tells you what he thinks. And you've got to think there was a value to that and how he recruited and coached his players. And some of those Georgia teams, I'll tell you what, if there was a 4-team playoff, Mark Richt would have been in 2 or 3 of those playoffs, and I'm not so sure that Georgia would have won a national championship had there been a 4-team playoff with Mark Richt. Especially when I look at that 2002 team, only lost 1 game. It just so happened that Ohio State and Miami were undefeated, but that Pollock and Green team in 2002, I've got to believe that team could have won a championship. So that was fun. That was an enjoyable interview. I know the Georgia fans, they celebrate all their coaches. It's not like that other places. I've been other places. Once a coach is done there, they vilify him, they cast him out. It's amazing. And I just think to myself, this man and his family served your community and did their best. And, that's another kind of cool thing about Georgia. I still talk with Coach Donnan. He's another former Georgia coach still in the community. And everybody's cool here. Hey, it's Kirby's show now, and people get that. But Donnan and Mark Richt and Coach Dewey, they all support. And I think that's another really cool thing about Georgia that you don't see everywhere else. Other places, once a guy's, it's like, don't you understand? You can like Mark Richt and still be Kirby Smart's biggest fan. You can like Jim Donnan and Jim Dooley or Vince Dooley, and it doesn't mean you're not going to like Mark Richt. Georgia doesn't have that breakdown that I've seen in other fan bases. When a coach leaves, he was the worst ever. I can't believe this guy ever. He was your coach. You were filling the stadium and cheering. How did he suddenly, one of the most fantastic stories to me was seeing Philip Fulmer, and there was nothing fantastic about him getting fired. It was horrible the way it happened, but coming full circle, and now he's back in charge as AD. So that was pretty fascinating. That was, you talk about a rise of, from the ashes. I mean, when Coach Fulmer was gone, people were like, oh, anybody could have done that. Anybody could have won that. And it's amazing. And you don't remember how it was and how competitive and how difficult it was. And when a guy like Mark Richt can coach 15 years and there's no major infractions, there's no NCAA investigate, there's no violations. He left your program at a place where a guy like Kirby Smart, who could have gone anywhere, Kirby was a red hot item with good reason, chose Georgia and was able to take what Mark left and 2 years later put it in the national championship game. That's remarkable. It's remarkable. It tells you what was left, and it tells you how Kirby advanced the ball on that. And here we are now, Kirby going into his 5th year, and Georgia has become an annual contender. And Georgia's spending the money. The McGill Society has come along now, where Georgia can build that $81 million facility. So times have changed, and it's a progression, and everybody plays a role in this. And it's not this coach against this coach. It's a continuation, an ascension for Georgia football. And I think everybody would agree that Mark Richt represented the program with class and gave his best. So take a look back here. See if you guys have any questions or comments for me today. We're going to have a cover 4 this afternoon at 3 o'clock. It's going to be right back here on the channel. Brandon Adams will be here. Of course, BA, DawgNation Daily, every day at 10 o'clock. Connor Riley is going to join us as well, Jeff Centel. And we're going to have some fun on this cover 4. So when we wrap this broadcast up, and I'm going to do that here in a few minutes, I want to save my voice for 3 because I'm going to have to be ready to to defend myself, because when we get into these cover fours, they really heat up. I don't know how many of you have seen those, but we get into these topics, these hot button topics, and sometimes things can get a little tense. So I got to be sharp and I've got to be ready and study these questions. You talk about, Eric brings up, we're talking minor. I'm talking program, probationary things. There's always going to be issues with individual players, violations, but I'm talking about major violations. When we think about the things that happened at Auburn, I've covered some major violations at Alabama in the 1990s. I covered some major violations at Auburn. These issues that, the Lane Kiffin year at Tennessee, and there was a 3-year investigation that overshadowed Derek Dooley's career. And Derek doesn't complain about it much, but I'll tell you, you're a Georgia audience. That guy had the NCAA over his back, and that shadow really restricted what Derek Dooley was able to do at Tennessee from a recruiting standpoint. That 1 year that Lane Kiffin had, I've compared it to an oil spill or a nuclear leak, because it triggered a lot of problems, and an NCAA investigation that lasted 3 years was going on. And so recruits would say, Coach, are we going to get it? And it was in the news. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back here. Mike Zambezi said the program could have been worse than what Rick left us. No doubt about that. Could have been a lot worse. Like I said, I just look at what happened when, Philip Fulmer left Tennessee and Lane Kiffin came in, and all the NCAA stuff. And, Derek Dooley just couldn't unbury him. It took Butch Jones a few years. I don't think he won till 10 games to his third year. He won 3 straight bowl games and a couple top 25s. But, there's Tennessee people that argue they're still getting back, right? So it's kind of interesting. I appreciate the compliment, Christopher. It's been a lot of fun today. Really kind of enjoyed having Coach Richt on. It just something that I've kind of been thinking about, and I talked to him last week, and he was going to come out Tuesday, but then the U-Haul and the moves and, the family first. You see that with Coach Richt. It's genuine, and just a guy I knew the Georgia fan base would like catching up with and visiting with. And hopefully we'll see Coach Richt around Athens more. Again, I know he's a guy, there's a lot of mutual respect between him and Kirby. Folks, I'm going to cut this program short right now at 12:45. I'm really glad that you were able to join me here for this special presentation with Mark Richt. If you've got more questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the queue. I always go back through and read what people are seeing, look for some different perspectives and points of view. But for now, that's it. I'm going to be back at 3 o'clock on the DawgNation Cover 4. Everybody have a wonderful Thursday, and hope to see you right back here in just a few hours.